If you clicked on this video, there's a good chance that you have already heard of the Philosopher's Stone, whether it be through your own personal esoteric journey or simply the Harry Potter movie. It was pretty popular. For those of you who haven't, the Philosopher's Stone comes from alchemy, which is known today as the father of chemistry, and similar to today how within physics, for example, the main goal is to create a unified theory, a theory of everything as it's put. The main goal of alchemy was the creation of this philosopher's stone. They called it the magnum opus. But despite all of the historical literature surrounding it, what it is exactly is still shrouded in mystery. It's most famous for being able to turn common metals such as lead into gold, but that's not it. Additionally, it was believed to hold the secrets to immortality, amongst other things. But there are already plenty of videos on YouTube that extensively cover the history of alchemy, the symbolism involved, etc. What I want to focus on is what the Philosopher's Stone is exactly, because as the name puts it, it's framed as being some sort of object. It's been called a stone, it's been called the tincture, some kind of substance, but the way that I see it, what I believe is that whether they knew it or not, these alchemists were trying to create some kind of portal, a portal to a different dimension. If you don't like this word portal, I know it's a bit dramatic and a tad bit schizo, so perhaps the word insight is preferable to you. Now here's the part where I try to explain what I mean by all of this. All you have to do is look at what the Philosopher's Stone is. It is some kind of object that can do anything. You have to keep in mind the historical context of this time period, of this alchemical era. Our imaginative capacity for what's possible is much greater than what it was back then. During that time period, something like an endless amount of gold, which would probably be phrased today as some kind of infinite money glitch, or eternal life when the life expectancy was 30 years old, this seemed like, pretty good stuff. But if you had to transition it to today, it would probably be something like time travel, the ability to jump to distant galaxies. So I believe the best way of conceptualizing the Philosopher's Stone is as some kind of living visage. It is an object that is able to do anything. It is able to make your wildest dreams come true. This isn't something that we only see with alchemy. We see it again, for example, with the genie in the lamp that grants you 3 wishes. I guess a more Jungian way of approaching it is that it's some kind of psychic object, some kind of archetypal object that lives within the collective psyche of humanity, this wish-fulfilling object. Many different cultures across history all appear to have their own version of this same thing. And when you analyze this situation with the Philosopher's Stone, this thing that can do anything, there is only one key that fits into that lock, and that is potentiality. Potentiality is the only thing that is able to be anything. This concept is extremely important when you look at Hermeticism, mysticism, alchemy. There is this huge emphasis on the union of opposites. It's called the coincidentia oppositorium. Within alchemy, this union of opposites is called the prima materia. It is what is believed to be the very fabric of reality. It's what everything is made up of. But what they are describing is potentiality. And one of the major themes of my philosophy, if you want to call it that, is that potentiality is a place. It's some kind of dimension. At least that's how I describe it. I know people get offended when I use that word. Some type of domain, plane, however you choose to phrase it. But it is real, but it is just some kind of dimension that we cannot perceive. You take left and right. To us, left and right make obvious sense. But if you collapse them into one, if you unify these opposites, they disappear. And my major theme is that they don't disappear from existence. They don't disappear from reality. They just disappear from us because we live on the other side of potential. We live in some kind of world of manifested potential. I call it the realm of material objects. It is the realm where things are able to happen. It is the realm of logic. And I've talked ad nauseum on what I mean by those three previous statements. I'll have a video on the screen where I kind of go into what I mean by that. And I'll repeat it yet again that this potentiality is a place. It is a kind of dimension that we just cannot perceive. We cannot describe it. As soon as you open your mouth to use language to describe it, you instantaneously leave potentiality and begin manifesting potential. That's what it is for things to happen for us. It is potential manifesting. What we consider to be our consciousness, it always takes place after potentiality. You don't find it odd that whenever we try and figure out where did everything start? If you want to go a more mystical or religious route, it starts at some kind of infinite potentiality that we cannot comprehend that magically starts making things happen. Whether you believe we came from the belly button of Vishnu or the God of Christianity that said, "Let there be light." If you want to take a more scientific approach, everything traces back to this Big Bang, this infinite point of infinite potentiality that our consciousness just can't seem to deal with. We cannot detangle it. We cannot enter it. Circling back to physics, we have reached this quantum layer of reality, and we have discovered that it is completely ruled by probability. I've discussed before in several videos that probability and statistics is just some type of measurement of potential. It's a technique that we have created whenever we encounter potentiality. It is to look at this giant superposition of possibilities and to try and divinate which one is going to come forth from it, which one is going to actually manifest. And what I believe the goal of the alchemist was to essentially carve out a peephole into this dimension. This dimension where things exist before they present themselves as things. Everyone throughout history who has thought about this eventually stumbles upon this place, and this appears to be where I've landed as well, whether you want to call it some kind of Kantian noumenal realm, whether you want to call it some kind of Platonic realm of ideas. The way that I tend to try and describe it is via the concept of a superposition. Things exist in a kind of increasingly undifferentiated way. You can look at the philosophy of Goethe. He noticed that all plants seem to follow a similar script. And as a result, he came to the conclusion that there has to be some kind of grand archetypal plant, some type of mother of all plants, if you want to phrase it that way. All botanical entities are expressions of this great mother. They are the children of it. They are new possibilities that it is expressing. And when you look at his analysis of it, this mother is pretty much everything that we perceive to be plant, everything that we perceive to be botanical. It is all of that lumped into one thing. That is this undifferentiated superposition that I am describing. And a metaphysical markup would be reality as a kind of cascading waterfall of these superpositions. Everything that we experience as manifested potential comes from a mother, and that mother has a mother, and the mother of that mother has a mother. And it is some kind of really far out fractalized level of organization that leads up into some one thing, some one incomprehensible singularity, some type of undifferentiatedness. And I believe that these cascading potentialities are what our ancient ancestors referred to as, the gods, these minor gods, or perhaps I've even said that they're like angels. For example, with this plant, this mother of all plants, that would be a god. They aren't the god, they are just over some type of domain. They are a part of this hierarchy of cascading potentiality. There is an old Buddhist poem that says, when you ask the god of spring, where do the flowers come from? Even he doesn't know. It's very similar to Faust. I don't know if you've read it or there was a movie that came out that was based on it. It's very similar to how this main character in the story, he sells his soul to gain forbidden knowledge, and this knowledge is granted to him through a demon called Mephistopheles. And after he signs this blood contract with the devil, one of the first things that he does is he pops the big question. He wants to know the secret, the meaning behind reality. And funnily, this demon Mephistopheles tells him that I don't know either. And even if I knew, I couldn't tell you because human beings can only understand language. They can only understand manifested potential, and to try and use language to describe that which manifests it is just a futile effort. But as I commonly preach on my channel or reiterate, this all has something to do with consciousness. Consciousness is the secret or the key to figuring all of this out. Consciousness is the Faustian secret. It was the answer to his question. It is the one thing remaining that we cannot seem to cover with language. We just cannot describe it. I always bring up, I can tell you the exact temperature of the sun, but I can't tell you what the sun looks like. I can't tell you what anything looks like, what anything tastes or feels like, even within alchemy. It wasn't about just boiling mercury and tinkering around with all of these various materials. The human psyche, the human consciousness, was considered to be the most important component of the process. These alchemists believed that reality was somehow, some way, comprised up of mind, comprised up of psyche, consciousness. You see it, I believe it's the first principle of Hermeticism, this principle of mentalism. They believed that by forging the stone, you were somehow forging your own soul. In that sense, I guess you could say that the philosopher's stone was something that you became rather than something that you held in your hand. In a way, I guess you could say they were trying to artificially manufacture their own ego death, because that's what an ego is, this thing that we all have. It is the belief in manifested potential. It is the belief that you are your own separate identity, that there is some kind of difference between what's on the inside of your head and what's on the outside of it. These alchemists did not fundamentally believe that. They believed that it was somehow one thing. And when you look at historical mystical intuition, or even today with science, this appears to be the case. Reality is one thing that is somehow represented as many things, whether this is, Brahma, whether this is God the Father, whether this is Allah, whether this is reality being a single quantum object, whether this is all of this starting from some sort of Big Bang singularity. no matter what we do, we cannot seem to evade this realization. It appears to just simply be the truth. As I tried to explain in my previous video, we are these higher dimensional projections that are somehow pressing on to this reality. And when this higher dimensional factor, energy, potentiality, I don't know, but when it presses onto this reality, to us it appears as potential manifesting. And everything that we consider to be a unit of a thing, all of these different categories that we place things in, they are like these egos. And what these egos are, they are dissensions from a superposition. They are manifested potential. And this manifested potential is the only thing that we are able to comprehend. It has been described as reality being made up of language. I've described it as information. This is essentially an echo of this Hermetic principle of mentalism, that our reality is comprised up of mind. If you want to look at it from a more philosophical approach, you can have this sort of Kantian view that a reality outside of consciousness is metaphysically impossible. But where I differ, my stance is that it simply lies in another dimension. This dimension of potentiality. You can look at the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment. The reason why the cat exists in a superposition until you open the box and find out what happened is simply because it was outside of the domain of your conscious experience. It wasn't until you actually went through the formality of knowing it, of actually opening the box, that's when this potentiality manifests. And yes, I understand that the observer effect is more of a result of the mechanisms that we use to measure things, but the point that I am making is independent of that fact. And what I believe is that things that have not yet realized, things that have not yet manifested, are simply in a different dimension. And you sort of have to wait for it to enter into this one. And before you think that I'm just talking about some crazy, kooky, schizophrenic nonsense, we deal with this every day. Don't you have to wait for tomorrow to come? Don't you have to wait for the potentiality of tomorrow to slap you in the face and turn into today? Is the future real, or is it completely hypothetical? In actuality, it's both. This is something that we all deal with every day, and it's just certain aspects of it have become normalized. This is why I use terms such as dimensionality, because the resemblance is just so uncanny. All of this future potentiality, the potentiality of the future, it is all slowly condensed down into this moment of the present, this infinitely dense moment, this black hole singularity. And the most common retort I'll get to this type of thinking is that, we've never been to the far stretches of the universe, to these distant galaxies, but we know that they're there. Are you telling me that they exist in some kind of different dimension? The problem with this is that we have ascertained the existence of these entities using logic. Logic is a form of perception. I don't know if you all know that. Mathematics is quite literally a language. The human being has this weird quirk where we are able to perceive things with our minds. We do this with mathematics. I believe that this is what the imagination is. It is some kind of interface with this domain of potentiality. And I have several videos where I go into more detail on what I mean by that, and I'll have one on the screen. When you look at, the history of evolution on this planet, when you look at the way that things are unfolding, we appear to be on some kind of crash course with this domain. This appears to be one of those realizations that everyone makes throughout history as well, whether you want to call it the grand alchemical wedding, whether you want to call it the return of the king, the teleological object, the omega point. I just call it the collapse of the 3D plane. And I have some videos on my members page where I am continually exploring this idea. But it's important to understand that it's not like we are separate from this potentiality. We just cannot perceive it. And there are all kinds of ways to try and go about explaining this, but in my previous video, I used the example of it being like some kind of sock puppet style relationship. It's almost like we are connected to this potentiality or this higher domain by some kind of umbilical cord. Perhaps a better example is like a ventriloquist doll, you know, the ones with the strings. We are these ventriloquist dolls like Pinocchio that cannot fundamentally see the strings. And our situation in this cosmos, the situation of all things in the cosmos, is some kind of grand consciousness that is being all things. Everything is kind of like in a trance. You know, when you watch a movie, you are captivated by it. Something happens to all of us that when the movie starts, you suspend all disbelief and you just become immersed in it. I know that we've all tried to get someone's attention who is watching a movie and they just can't seem to break the trance. They can't seem to pay you any mind. In that moment, you really feel like you are the characters. Or if you are a more religious type, if you are God, you are what you believe you are. There isn't anyone else to tell you otherwise. When you have a daughter and you are sipping this imaginary tea with her, you know, you are all playing house, she really believes that she is, you know, the Queen of England. She is a princess. You, as the more knowledgeable adult, knows that this is all pretend, but imagine a scenario where there is no higher authority. You are the authority. You instantaneously become what you believe. And one thing that I believe that the psychoanalysts like Freud got right is the importance of childhood. This whole framework of the child is extremely important to the great scheme of what's going on. And I sincerely believe that consciousness is on some kind of journey. It's been phrased as a kind of hero's journey, but I think it's more specifically the journey of the prodigal son. It's something that comes full circle, but perhaps I'll talk about that in my next video. I have been yapping for quite some time and I try to keep these videos somewhat short. Like the video if you found it interesting, comment and let me know what you guys think. Subscribe to the channel. This channel is about to hit 15K subs, so I am grateful for that. Also, I have come upon a year of making these videos. When I started this channel, I never really had any dreams of being some kind of YouTuber. I know it's pretty much like trying to be some kind of Hollywood actor. I'm not that delusional to believe that I belong somewhere on a big screen. But if you have been here since the beginning, or if you have joined at any point in this journey, I'd like to thank all of you. It has been very interesting, and I have learned a lot about myself and the world around me. As for the future of this channel, who knows what the future holds? It is all a part of the mystery, the great potentiality, or as it's commonly put, the great unknown. We will all see. And until next time, y'all have a blessed day.